Do we need to use a wet palette in our painting? What is a wet palette even used for? A lot of people ask me these questions, and I think they're pretty important for acrylic painters, especially if we're not going to finish our painting all in one session and want to do it the next day, or we're mixing colors that we want to preserve and have ready for our next painting session. So I'm going to show you a couple versions of wet palettes. I'm also going to show you how you can make your own out of items that you already have at home probably. And we're going to look into the wet palette mystery together and figure out what they're used for, how they're useful to our acrylic painting, and if we really need them. My name is Sheila Landry from Art Asylum, and let's go look at this and explore together. So, what is a wet palette? I will show you. A wet palette is a place to keep your paint while you're painting that keeps the surface moist so that your acrylic paint and paint like acrylic that dries quickly will not dry out as fast. You could probably use it with gouache if you wanted. I wouldn't really recommend it with watercolor because that'll reconstitute quite fast, but gouache tends to dry a little quicker to me than watercolor paint. It's sometimes harder to reconstitute. Mainly I use it with my acrylic painting. I use Deco Art bottled acrylics, but it'll work good with tube acrylics or anything like that. And what wet palettes are, they're a sheet of paper, palette paper, that's porous, not the kind that has the coating on it like some of the palette papers. Underneath is a sponge that you wet, and you soak the paper before you put it on the palette so it absorbs the moisture. It's wet. You could see it's wetter on the middle than the edges. My edges were sticking up here a little, but then the moist sponge keeps the paper damp. And then when you put your acrylic paint on it, it's a nice hydrated surface that's going to keep your paint nice and workable. So you're not going to get it to dry. Like if you put it on a glass palette or something like this, it's not porous and it's dry, so if it's a summer day or that, your paint's going to start to dry up pretty quickly. The other advantage of wet palettes when you buy palettes like this, or when we make one like I'm going to show you in the next segment, is they come with lids. So when you're done painting for the day, or if the phone rings, or if you have to go make dinner for the kids, you can snap on the lid. And as long as the lid is airtight, that moisture is going to stay in that little environment for your paint, and it's going to stay wet a lot longer. Good wet palettes seal well, so they can last days, months. You know, I've had them weeks and months where I go back and the paint is still workable. So you do have to watch out for mold. You know, it depends what kind of sponge and how long in your environment. Some people say if you put a copper penny, do we even have pennies anymore, underneath the sponge, that it will stop the mold, but I don't know. I've never really tried that way, but what it does is your paint is workable. You can pick it up, without being watered down. So that's what a wet palette's function is. It keeps your acrylic paints or paints that dry quickly nice longer. Now I've used them as well with my Inktense blocks. And the Inktense blocks are sticks of pigment that are ink that you use dry. Hold on, I should have had a piece of paper out here. You use them dry, and then you wet them to activate them. So I will show you here. you can use them, you could draw right on the paper. You could take a damp brush and use them like that. I don't want to get sidetracked by that, but I wanted to show you they reactivate, and once they dry, unlike watercolors, they don't reconstitute as long as you activate them completely. The problem is if you're using Inktense and you have to go away or that, you're going to waste what you have on your palette if you're mixing or that, because once it dries it won't reactivate. So what I do a lot of times is I take a little knife and I'll flick some of the Inktense material onto my palette. I think I got some on there too. And you're going to see with the wet brush how they activate, and you can make paint with them. And this will, once it's on here and it's on this moist piece of paper, as long as it doesn't dry out, you'll be able to use it indefinitely. So it's really helpful like that. So if you're an Inktense person, when I do some videos on using Inktense, I'll show you how that works, how it works for me. I'll be using that too. So anyway, this one is called, I wanted to show you the types of palettes. This one's called a Masterson's Handy Palette. It has the snap-on lid. It's called a Handy Palette because of the size. This is a smaller size, but for my desk and my purposes, I paint small things, so this is great. This is big enough. And the lid snaps on. Now my Masterson's palette I took with me when I moved from Chicago to Nova Scotia. That was over 21 years ago, so it's lasted quite a long time. The only thing you have to replace in it is the paper. They have the handy size, and they have the big size too. You can get this at Michael's. You can get it at Amazon. I think I'll have links below for that, for my affiliate, my Amazon affiliate. And you can also get the sponges. These are the sponges that go in there. Masterson's makes them. They're a little bit expensive. I like getting, these are called sometimes Swedish dishcloths. They're on Amazon. You get 10 in a package, and they are only like, I think I paid $8 Canadian for 10 of them. And they're a little bit different size, but I wind up cutting them to size and they work perfectly. They're almost exactly the same material that the Masterson's is, but it's for about 1/3 of the price. So if you guys use the Masterson's palette already, you can go on Amazon and look for these, and they will be a very good alternative for them. And now this palette that I wanted to show you, whoops, sorry, is called a NicPro. And I kind of like this because I was looking for something that would also hold paint at the top. So then I figured I could have 2 layers, because I was working with another kind of paint that I thought that would be kind of cool to have up there. And they were kind of reasonable. They were also on Amazon, and they're $20-some. But when I got them, even though I liked the way they were put together, there were some things about them that bothered me. And I will get into that and show you right now. They came, this is a new package. They came with the accessory pack, and you got sheets of paper, palette paper, and a couple extra sponges with them. So I actually got 2. So they also came with this little rack to hold your brush on. So that was nice too. I mean, it's a nice product. I like the section there. That was kind of cool. The problem I had with it though, and it did have a problem as far as I was concerned, you could see the paper is quite a bit thinner than the Masterson's paper. It's almost like a film. It's almost like a wax paper without a wax, or a very thin parchment paper. And what I found happens, I liked it because it feels moist, but it doesn't get you wet. So it doesn't hold the moisture the same. But the problem I found is once the sponge was activated and wet, this sponge is wet. This is by NicPro. And it doesn't quite make it to the edges of the cavity that holds it. And the paper doesn't, the paper's a little bit bigger than the sponge. So what happens as you're painting is you put your paint here and then these edges start to dry and they curl, which is really annoying because what it does, the weight from it curling, is it pushes your paint colors all together and makes a mess. And it doesn't stay as hydrated as the Masterson one. Like within an hour of me painting, it starts to dry. Like even this now feels very dry, and I just wet it before I started filming. So I wasn't happy with that at all. So what I wound up doing, that's why this is my second version of it. What I wound up doing with mine is I took the sponges that I showed you. I just happen to have a yellow one. Excuse me shuffling here. I took these sponges and I cut one to shape, and then I used the Masterson's paper, which is that thicker. You could see the difference in it. I hope you can. This thicker paper that you soak, and I use it in with this palette, and it works a lot better. It's much better. I do like the seal on this palette better. It sits in here. I wound up putting an arrow on the top. There we go. I hope you could see it there to show the up, because you can't tell the upside from the down. And my paint is on the bottom. And what I do when I put the sponge away, when I wet the sponge, I put another piece of paper underneath so that I don't have to soak my paper first. You're supposed to soak this thicker paper for about 10 or 15 minutes to really let it get hydrated before you start using it. So if I keep one underneath, then when I add more water to my palette, it's already hydrating that paper underneath, and then it's ready to use. So sometimes I put, if I know I'm going to be doing a lot of painting, I'll put a couple sheets even under there. Cut them to fit and put them under. And I find this works much better with this paper, the Masterson's paper, and this type of sponge instead of what came with the NicPro. However, I do like that the NicPro seals better. It does have a better seal, and it seems to keep the paint moist longer. So there's that. So I guess I made a hybrid of the two of them and put them together. And what I also did was cut little pieces of sponge for here, so that if I want to store mixed colors or mix a color up here, I can leave it in this top area, put the lid on, and it'll stay good for probably a week or so. I've done it with acrylic paints where I've mixed. I know a lot of my followers that I paint with don't like to mix acrylic paint, because once you mix it, you have to use it or it dries. And you can mix it on here, and that works better. It stays nice and humid in there. You put the lid on tight and you're good to go. So those are my palettes that I use. In the next section, I'll show you how you can make your own palette if you don't want to buy one of these two or another brand. So what if you don't want to spend the money and really get a palette, or you're not sure and you want to just try it out? Well, I'm going to show you how you can make a very easy wet palette that'll be certainly sufficient for you to try, and you may just want to do that and not spend money. I mean, we're all having trouble, or a lot of us are having trouble keeping up with costs and prices, so this is a really easy way to do things. I'm going to start off by saying that this handy palette paper is something that I consider probably a necessity. I tried using regular computer paper, you know, and it seems like it's computer paper, but it seems a little thicker. But the difference is if you use regular paper that you would print on, it tends to pill, and it's just not the same make, you know, it's just made differently. So I think the package of the handy palette at Michael's is probably around $5 or $6, and you get 30 sheets, which is really good. What I wind up doing on my palettes too, it may sound cheap, but I look at it as not being wasteful, is once I'm done with a project, or if my palette gets too filled of, you know, icky paint on it, I just go to the sink and use a little scrub brush, and I scrub it with plain water and clean it off as good as I can, and it works beautifully. It's not a problem at all. Let's see if I have, did I put a new piece in? Yeah, I did put a new piece. I'm sorry, I was going to show you. Sometimes you'll get staining from the colors that were on there before, but they really, if they're staining when you're scrubbing them, they're not going to come off on your paint, so you really don't have much to worry about. But the handy palette paper is really kind of a must. Again, they have it at Michael's. They have it at probably Hobby Lobby, though I haven't been there in years, but I know they used to carry it. And Amazon, both in the U.S. and in Canada, carries it. So you can get that pretty easily, and that's probably the cheapest, you know, link of the whole thing, and easy to do. If you want to build your own palette, all you have to do is get a high quality paper towel. I know in the US they have Vivas. Here in Canada we don't have Viva, but I like using these. They're called white balls. I don't know if you can see the name. This came in a box from Amazon, and there were 70 of these paper towels. They're like cloth almost. They're really nice. You could see there's no texture on them. There's a little thin texture, but there's not like that embossing like a lot of paper towels have. And they're almost like cloth. They're almost stretchy, and, you know, they're very well put together. They're not going to shred for you. And all you have to do is take like a meat tray. I have these little containers that come 10 in a pack to save your food. And you put the paper towel in there, wet it down. You don't want it drippy, but you want it good and wet. You can even wet it in the sink. You know, I'm just doing this here to show you, but you could wet it in the sink and squeeze it out, and that would be great. And then as long as it's not dripping, you know, you put it on there, and you could put your paper on it, and it'll work pretty much the same way. You know, it'll keep your paint moist. You could pick up if you want to do float shading. You can brush on it. It would work great. Then when you're done with painting for your session, you take the bottom and just put it on there and snap it, and you're pretty much airtight. So that's one way to do it. The other way, you could take a porcelain dish. This was from the dollar store, which I wind up using for my watercolor. And, you know, just set it on there. Wet your paper towel, and your acrylic paint will stay nice. So that's another easy option for you. And there's no seal on this, but, you know, if you really wanted to keep the palette, you could put a piece of saran wrap. Since this is glass, it will stick really well, and it'll keep the air out for the next session if you didn't finish your painting. So, like I said, I work with acrylic paint all the time. I'm a slow painter. I don't paint quickly. And it usually takes me several sessions. I get interrupted a lot with, you know, doing just stuff around the house, making dinner, stuff like that. And it's so easy to have a wet palette where I could just close the lid and be done with it. So I hope this helps you in your acrylic paint journey. It makes a big difference. You can feel better about mixing colors. You can feel better about not wasting your paint because paint is expensive. And I think it will work nicely for you. So if you enjoyed this video, I have others in my playlist up here for different types of projects, as well as different kinds of techniques and products that I use. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you check out my other videos, and if you like and subscribe or have any questions, let me know if you guys use wet palettes and what you think of them. What's your favorite wet palette to use, and do you like the Mastersons, or have you found that you don't need them? I would love to know. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.